Hi, I'm Dylan Cox and this is my Froch v Groves wrap-up. Carl Froch scores a massively controversial 9th round TKO victory over challenger George Groves at the Phones For You arena in Manchester last night. Challenger Groves came out to the centre of the ring as he said he would do, and in the first round he looked fantastic. Sharp jab, beating Froch to the jab very easily there and dropping him with a monster rapier right hand towards the end of the first round. It was a fantastic shot and one that Froch really struggled to get up from. I mean, he was up straight away, but you could see he was on unsteady legs and his head was all over the place, and he even said in the interview after the fight that he couldn't even remember getting knocked down. So it makes you think that he was perhaps suffering from a sort of very mild concussion there even during the fight. It was an absolute monster shot from Groves. Groves did exactly what we thought he was going to do. He was boxing beautifully behind a very sharp, quick jab. The right hand was coming in. He was even throwing some nice shots to the body, and he was really just getting off at will on Carl Froch. He did exactly what he said he would do, and he would land that right hand and he would get it straight through the gaps in Froch's defence. Froch's jab was lazy, it was pouring at times. I don't entirely agree with Sky's commentary. I think they were very pro Groves as soon as Groves got off to a good start, and Froch did have marginal bits of success throughout rounds sort of two up until the stoppage, but nothing worth writing about, and definitely it was Groves that was in charge for the majority of the fight. Groves did look a little bit awkward on the ropes at times, and you know, when Froch did manage to push him back, Groves sort of covered up a bit and sort of held on the inside. You know, he clearly didn't want to fight on the inside, whereas Froch, you know, Groves was holding one arm and Froch was trying to get off with his free arm and just getting some uppercuts, etc. But Groves did look a little bit awkward in the clinch and also on the ropes, but when he was holding centre ring and he was letting his shots go, he made Froch look very clumsy, very slow, and at times very amateurish, which, you know, in the past we have seen that happen to Froch, but no one has put it on Froch like Groves did right from the start, and that right hand was just landing time after time after time. Carl Froch was getting nailed so often that you just thought, he can't take this anymore, but then he would come back. I just don't know what this guy's made of. He's from a different planet. He's got to be. The guy is insanely strong, insanely determined, and to take that kind of punishment and continue to come forward and then fight back, I really do tip my hat off to him. Froch did start coming back into the fight in the later rounds, round 8 and eventually in round 9 where he got the stoppage. He did start to come back, but how he does that, I really don't know. Groves, earlier in the fight, he was sticking to such a great game plan, and then around about the 6th, he just started to want to goad Froch in, dropped his hands a little bit, and I think he wanted to prove a point, and I think that is due to his inexperience a little bit. He wanted to show that he could go toe-to-toe with Froch a little bit because he was so far ahead in the fight at that point. I think he was trying to prove to him, look, you can't even hit me with my hands down. And then he was fighting like it was the 12th round. He was taking a few shots, he was coming back, and then he settled down again in the 7th. This is where the absence of Adam Booth in the corner really hurt George Groves, I think, because he would come back to that corner at the end of the 7th round, or at the end of the 6th round, sorry, after, you know, engaging in a bit of a war with Froch. And Paddy Fitzpatrick was a great cornerman. I thought he was very calm and good, but you know, when you've worked with Groves so long like Booth had, he would have been able to really rein Groves in and say, look, what are you doing? You know, you need to get back to your boxing, you want to win this fight, you want to get back to your boxing, you know. And I think Groves would have listened to that. He just lost the plot a little bit in that round, and then eventually, I think that's what kind of happened in the 9th round. He got buzzed with a couple of shots, and then he wanted to go to war. And when he held, he was sort of leaning in and almost falling onto Froch. But he didn't show that sort of experience and skill, and that will come with time. And he's only, you know, a 20-fight novice, really. And to compete at that level and expose Froch last night, which he did do. You know, let's not beat around the bush here. He did expose Froch to a certain extent, or to a massive extent. And I think, you know, the commentators who are saying, oh, you know, it's a case of Froch getting old overnight. I don't agree with that. You know, we've seen these openings in Froch before, but there's only so many shots that a man can take. We don't know what that is for Froch, but it wasn't pretty to see him getting hit with all of those right hands. Now let's go to the real talking point, the stoppage by Howard Foster, the referee. You know, there's many times in that fight you could have argued that Foster could have stepped in and stopped Carl Froch. He definitely should have stepped in and deducted a point from Carl Froch for hitting behind the head and various other dirty tactics that Froch was using when he was struggling in the fight. But it seemed like he did jump in far too soon with George Groves. I mean, hindsight's a wonderful thing. We can look back and we say, okay, Howard Foster saw Groves hurt and stunned by a couple of shots, and when he held him, Groves did sort of fall into him a bit. But I think that was just more of a stagger rather than him suffering from the after effects of those shots. You've got to give the guy a chance, and what him and Paddy Fitzpatrick said after the fight, I think is spot on. Howard Foster had in his head that Carl Froch is a warrior and you need to give him as much chance as he can because of what he's done in the past. But with George Groves, he's got this image of being chinny, somewhat unfairly, and Howard Foster, as soon as he started getting landed on, just pulled them apart and stopped the fight. I think what Howard Foster, to me, it looked like he did was he saw a few shots, he sort of hesitated, he sort of thought to himself, I want to break them up. But as soon as he breaks them up, he knows he has to stop the fight because there's no standing 8 counts. And get a count if the ropes are deep to have held you up, which he could have maybe have done there when Froch was against the ropes. He could have then gone in, given him a count if he wanted to give him a bit of a chance. But I think he reacted quickly. I'm not going to blame the referee in terms of what he was thinking at the time, because I think he had the fight of safety at heart. We'd be all complaining much more if he let it go on far too long. It is a real travesty though, because I feel so sorry for George Groves, I feel sorry for Carl Froch, and I feel sorry for all of the fans as well, because I think we were robbed. All three of us were robbed. The fans, Froch and Groves, were robbed because we didn't get the outcome that we really wanted, a clear winner in this fight. George Groves, could have been stopped in the next 5 or 10 seconds, but we will never know. He could have just wore it out and then got the last 3 rounds in the bag and won on a decision. He could have come back in the 10th round and knocked Carl Froch out. We just won't know. Carl Froch, many people are saying, oh, he was very lucky, and he was lucky that the stoppage came at that point, but he was robbed of the chance to prove that he can come back from the absolute verge of defeat and get an unbelievable stoppage like he did against Taylor. So let's go to those booing and the sort of the disdain for Froch after the fight. He's gone from being like the ultimate champion to everyone booing him. It wasn't his fault. Some of his comments afterwards were slightly unsavoury, but at the time, we're all wound up, we're all hyped up, and we don't enjoy what we're hearing, but we have to give them their respect, because they've been in a very tough fight, and he's just saying everything that's coming out of his mind. And to be honest, I think he was still a bit buzzed at the end of the fight. I mean, I saw the post-fight interviews with IFL TV, and he's talking about he thought he won the 2nd and 3rd rounds. I mean, I think he clearly wasn't fully recovered after the fight, and he was still a bit dazed. And the fact that he said, like I said earlier, that he didn't realise he got knocked down in the first. But that doesn't excuse, being slightly rude to George. And I think George's stock has just risen so much because he looked like such a gentleman in defeat. He went over to shake Carl Froch's hand initially. Froch, didn't allow him to do that, and then came back and then did shake his hand eventually. But the way he conducted himself post-fight, the way he talked to Sky afterwards, so openly and honestly, I absolutely believe this is going to rocket him to the next level. A few people on Twitter were sort of saying that Britain's lacking that sort of man of the people champion, and I think last night was a point where you thought George Groves could step into that mantra, and he really could be the next sort of people's champion of this country and world champion as well, because last night he was that close. Inexperience and a poor refereeing decision robbed him of that opportunity. But he will be back. Other key talking point was the judges' scorecards. It's shocking that 2 judges had only 1 point in it at the time of the stoppage. I do not know what fight they were watching. Yes, Sky's commentary was hugely biased towards Groves, but at the same time, you could give Froch maybe 2 rounds there if you were being generous, I guess. To have it by just 1 round on the judges' scorecards, on 2 scorecards, is an absolute disgrace. But I don't agree with people blaming Eddie Hearn, because I've seen that as well on Twitter, and I'm just thinking, come on, I don't know why people are trying to blame the promoter in that situation. He did his job, he put a great fight on, the 2 fighters put a tremendous fight on, and the judges just ruined that. I think now it's clear to me that it's time for Carl Froch to retire from the sport. I don't want to see him back in the ring eating up shots like that, and then having to come back from the brink to score a victory. He's done everything he said he would ever do. He's beaten some fantastic fighters. He's been in with the very best. He doesn't need to be taking punishment on an ongoing basis in future fights. And I think, hopefully the people around him and himself can look at his wonderful career. He's got the victory last night. He can go off into the sunset. It's going to be a little bit like when Lewis beat Klitschko and he beat him in sort of controversial circumstances with the cut, etc. And as time goes on, that will sort of, that will still be hanging over him. But for Froch, forget about what people think about the fight. On paper, you got the win. Yes, morally and many people's eyes, you were losing that fight. Well, he was clearly losing that fight. But it's sometimes better to save from yourself. So he can't keep going into the ring and getting in fights like that. And hopefully McCracken, Hearn, the people around him make him realise that he's had a great career. He's getting older. He's getting hit more over than often. So I think time to call it a day for Carl Froch. Where does George Groves go from here if the Froch rematch doesn't happen? I think Groves has got so many options now, and I think he's proven himself at this level. I think he'll learn a lot from this fight, but he does need to work on his defence. He does need to work on so many different things, and he's not the finished article yet. But that will all come with time, hopefully. And it's so exciting and so fresh to see a young guy who's so confident, but also was able to back that up, but also has world-class skills. I mean, the jab and the right hand were beautiful shots. He didn't throw the hooks too well. He didn't fight on the inside very well, and he didn't fight off the ropes very well. And he was a bit awkward when he was holding in close. But those are bits that he needs to work on, and he needs to find. But the fundamentals, the hand speed, the power at that level, to drop Carl Froch like he did, proves that George Groves can go a long way in this sport. And a final word for the moment in the dressing room afterwards, when we saw Adam Booth reconcile with George Groves and give him a cuddle. And they both looked very emotionally charged there, rightfully so. And it was just nice to see, all this sort of people talking about bad blood, court cases, etc. At the end of the day, those two have got a bond together and an undying respect for each other, and I think it was a very nice touching scene to see them reconcile. George Groves, you fought your heart out. You did brilliantly throughout the build-up. You said exactly what you said was right afterwards. You said what other people didn't dare say. You said there's flaws in Carl Froch. You never disrespected him, but you said these are the things I can do to expose those flaws, and you did your very best to do it. And I think you were so close to pulling off the victory, and it's just sad that we were all robbed of that opportunity. I was very sad after the fight for all of those reasons. I think boxing gets a little bit of a black eye from it because it's such a great fight. The talking point's always going to be about the stoppage now, and forgetting how great George Groves performed in that fight up until that point. The people who predicted Carl Froch to win, it was there. I can't deny it. Froch was coming back into the fight, but we'll never know how that would have concluded. And for me, that's the saddest part. But it was a fantastic fight, a fantastic effort from a much younger and fresher George Groves, and Carl Froch once again proving you cannot keep him down. He is an absolute warrior. He is an absolute warrior who deserves everybody's respect. A great fight with a controversial ending, and that concludes my Froch v Groves wrap up. Stay tuned, don't forget to comment, share and like this video, subscribe to our channel and check out all of the stuff that Radio Raheem's putting up currently on the YouTube channel from Macau. He's got all the post-fight stuff, got one-to-one interviews. Manny Pacquiao over there in Macau doing the business over points against Brandon Rios, plus all the undercard stuff he'll be putting through there as well. So we'll see you next time, fight fans.